I'm here today with authors of a new book titled Learning Our Names, Asian American Christians on Identity, Relationships, and Vocation from IVP. Sabrina S. Chan, a daughter of immigrants from Hong Kong, is National Director of Asian American Ministries for InterVarsity Christian Fellowship USA. She's an ordained minister and earned a master's degree in theology from Fuller Theological Seminary. Thao, who is Hmong American, is an InterVarsity campus staff member in Wisconsin and previously served as the director of InterVarsity's Hmong Christian Collegiate Conference. Other authors of the book include Linson Daniel and E. David De Leon. You can learn more about the book and their authors at ivpress.com. So Sabrina and Lau, thanks so much for joining us, and congratulations on the launch of your new book.
Thanks, Brent. Great to be here.
So maybe to get started, each of you can tell us a little bit about yourselves that I didn't say. Sabrina, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. Maybe something to share would be that I grew up and have lived all over the country. So I grew up in Virginia, in Richmond, Virginia, went to Texas, Houston, and Austin, where I was in school and then was an engineer, and then came on staff with InterVarsity down there. And then after about 15 years in Texas, went to the Bay Area of California, was there for 9 years, where it's where I met my husband and we had kids. We moved back to the East Coast a few years back in North Carolina, and just recently moved back to Richmond. So kind of been all over the place, and life as an Asian American, as a Chinese American woman, is experienced differently depending on the geography of where you live and proximity to other Asian Americans and other communities. So that's been that's been a part of my journey.
Yes, I can totally imagine that. And as you said, you've lived in quite a few different places, so it gives you a different perspective a lot of people don't have. La, how about you?
Yeah, I'm La, and I think in contrast to Sabrina, I've lived in Wisconsin my whole life, but I lived in different parts of Wisconsin. And so I am Hmong American, and Wisconsin has a pretty good sized Hmong American population. And I think living in Wisconsin, I've grown to take pride in being an Asian American person living in the Midwest. And similar to what Sabrina was saying, your experience as an Asian American really also depends on where you live as well. And so, so in Wisconsin, the Asian American population is not very diverse. More so in like Milwaukee, Mass, in the bigger areas, but everywhere else, it's Southeast Asians, Hmong Americans. And so that's what I grew up with. And that's sort of my experience growing up in Wisconsin. But I do enjoy living here as much as I know people feel like there's nothing in Wisconsin. But I enjoy it. Like I said, I've taken pride in living in the Midwest, and I like that I'm able to bring like a certain perspective to the Asian American experience that we don't often get to hear about. So yeah, that's who I am. I grew up here, went to school at UW-Madison, studied biology, and started working with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship like 10 years ago, serving on different campuses throughout Wisconsin. So yeah.
Very cool. So let's get to the new book. As I mentioned, the title is Learning Our Names, Asian American Christians on Identity, Relationships, and Vocation. How did that book come about?
I took the national director role here. I'm sorry. Sorry. About 5 years ago. And one of the first things that I was thinking about was how much a previous book by Asian American InterVarsity staff authors had impacted me, and how a book just has a little bit more reach, well, a lot more reach than individual conversations with staff or with student leaders, and felt like, it's been, that book came out when I was in college, and it's been a while. Asian America has changed. There's probably new things to say, and wanted to gather a team to work on that. So I really wanted to also represent the diversity of Asian America, that we are a number of different communities from a number of different geographies. And so invited La, David and Linson to join and come to a gathering in Chicago where we met with the our IVP editor, Al Shee, and started like thinking about what would a proposal entail, like what kinds of things would we want to write about. And that was November 2018. We got a proposal in and got approved, started writing, and then pandemic hit and, just a lot of challenges. But through it all, it felt like our communities and our staff community, especially a lot of staff, helped us with like giving feedback and all these different things. So it became a way to try and help. And Law probably has more to add for this, but like I was thinking about it as a way to help Asian American Christians, especially young Asian American Christians, discern what does it mean to follow Jesus as who I am, and to share stories of discernment of what does it mean to follow Jesus as an Asian American in this generation, in these times. So we're not trying to necessarily prescribe as much as describe, and offer examples, offer stories, and start conversations for people. That Christians throughout the centuries have had to try and discern what does it mean to follow Jesus in my stage in my life and as who I am. And so, trying to name some of those things.
La, how about what's your perspective on how the book came about?
I was going to say, that was great, Sabrina. I don't know if I have anything else to add. I mean, like I remember being invited and I feel like there's just been some talks even like years ago about like, like we need a new book or there needs to be another book or something, just because there's been a couple of books in the past written by Asian American authors as well. And so I got the invitation from Sabrina and accepted it. And just as Sabrina said, like we met in Chicago and brainstormed, shared stories with each other. And once our proposal got approved, we started writing, and I feel like those years feel like a blur to me just because so much has happened. But I feel like how the book became what it is now wasn't exactly what we thought it would be, maybe. Like I think we were like, okay, we're gonna write about these topics that we listed in the chapters, and then we started writing and it became what it is. And I mean, like, I don't even know how that happened, but it just happened. And I feel like this book is more like a companion for people on their journey of figuring out who they are and how does that intersect with their faith. And we don't feel like we have like the answer and this is it for many years to come. It's like, hey, we're figuring this out too. And like we're here for you through this book, and maybe in the future, hopefully another book will come out that's a little more updated and with new information or whatever that can be helpful for people. So, yeah.
I think one thing I'd throw in too is even just talking the last few weeks with some of us, like the book is kind of born out of many years of experiences of like, our own experiences, but also walking with a lot of different students and alumni. But even just the other day, La, you were saying that like one of the stories in the book you started writing like 10 years ago, right? And like, so, and even like, I know Linson had a blog before too, and David's done a bunch of writing too. I just was like, have been struck by like how long, I know this about authors, that like a lot of them have been writing for a long time before it ever sees the light of publishing, And so just, I want to throw that out there because I'm like, oh yeah. It was neat to hear, La, that you had been writing about this story, reflecting on that story for a long time. So,
yeah, and I think there was something about writing during COVID, like remembering the past, like our stories in light of what's happening to us currently, like with COVID and the anti-Asian racism and all that stuff. So I felt like there was a lot of growing in all of us and like figuring out our voice in the midst of all of this as we were writing as well. And I think that helped form the book to be what it is today. Yeah.
That's good.
Sabrina, you mentioned that, you were trying to, include people from different regional ethnic backgrounds within Asia. And Linson, Daniel, and David DeLeon were not with us, but they contributed. Where are they from?
Yeah. Linson is Indian American.
Mhm.
His family's Malayali, and David is Filipino
Okay.
American. Yeah. So Linson's in Texas, and David's from California, but now lives in New York City.
That's very cool. You were able to pull, those different regions and backgrounds together.
Yeah.
So today we're recording this on August 30th, which is actually the book release day. So happy book birthday, first of all, to you. I think that's fantastic.
Thanks.
And you mentioned that you had worked on it with Al Shee, who's a senior editor at University Press, who's spoken at our conferences and worked with Al for quite some years. He's really got an amazing reputation within the industry. He's a great person to work with. I assume you guys found that to be the case too.
Yeah. I mean, he's the only editor I've ever worked with, but yeah, Al was great. I think for me, just had lots of helpful insights and very encouraging, I think, through the process. And I trusted him a lot, also because I've had friends who've written books and he was their editor. So that, I mean, I trust him as a friend too. I've known Al for a long time, but never worked with him like as an author. And so just hearing from friends and also just as he worked with us, I was like, oh yeah, this is really helpful.
Mm. And so,
Um,
go ahead, La.
oh yeah, I was just gonna add, I think Al was probably the most positive one out of all of us when it came to writing the book. Because I think as we kept delaying deadlines and missing deadlines and I don't think I mean, according to Al, he was never concerned about us, even though we were all concerned about whether we were gonna ever finish this book. So that was definitely like good that we had that in Al because there were times where it was just, it was hard to write and we were all really discouraged, but
Mhm.
Al was super positive about everything.
Well, he's gone through that shepherding process with lots of other authors. I'm sure many times apprehensive or
Yep.
skeptical and, having doubts. So I can imagine being quite good at supporting that. So who would you say the book is most intended for?
I feel like that's a good question. Because I think we talked about the title too, about how the title, it depends where you're coming from. Um, like anyone can get something out of the book. Um, I think when we originally came up with the idea for the book, we hoped that it would be for, I don't know, young Asian Americans. I mean, primarily like Christians, but we hope that um, anyone who, didn't identify as Christian would be able to still receive something out of it. And also for anyone who just cares about Asian Americans and Asian American students. Yeah, like for them to learn about the Asian American experience. So I don't know, like, I mean, I guess primarily for Asian Americans, but I think anyone can get something out of the book. Sabrina, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah. I mean, I feel similarly. When we were writing, somebody else asked me this, like when they were like, oh, how did you sort of center Asian Americans, or did you think about other people who might read it? I was like, I honestly tried not to think about other people who might read it at some level, like when we were writing. I think later in the process, like, I'm glad we have editors who are like looking for that and like sort of thinking more broadly. So we want other people to read the book. Like the book is not just for Asian Americans, but we were trying to write to Asian Americans, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense. So we think lots of folks could benefit from reading and hearing, more stories and understanding more of like, what Asian American Christians are thinking about or dealing with. But I'll speak for myself, tried not to think too hard about what a quote unquote outsider might think. Cause it was like,
Mm-hmm.
otherwise I'll get hung up on like how I say things or whatever. And so I was just trying to think about like, who are the people that I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we all wrote with Asian Americans in mind, right? Like that's who we were thinking of when we were thinking of our audience. And I agree with Sabrina. Like when I was writing this, that's what I was thinking about. And I made sure that that was my focus and not feel the pressure to over explain myself or certain things that I was talking about. Um, I went with I went in with the assumption that my audience, Asian Americans, would be able to grasp enough of what I was trying to say where I didn't have to explain it compared to if I wrote to an audience that didn't really understand what I was talking about. So I felt like empowered to do that, and not feel like I had to explain everything, as if I was writing to like a general audience or non-Asian Americans.
Yeah. And that's why I think you mentioned Al as our editor. That's why I think having Al She as an Asian American editor was like really amazing. So when we first got and we were dialoguing about stuff, and when he'd send us feedback, it just helped to know that he is also Asian American and can understand. Yeah, so he gets what we're trying to do, but also he's the senior editor, so he's also thinking, is this enough so that other people can understand it too? So really grateful for him, and I know that we long for there to be more editors of color in publishing, so that can be more of a common experience.
Absolutely. No, that's another thing where there has been some growth recently.
Okay, great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Across the industry. It was a big problem too when I first started publishing in color. It was not just enough books being published by writers of color, but not enough agents or editors of color. And that's changing. I've seen all the publishing houses I should say many of the publishing houses put a priority in doing that. And so just in the, 5 years, I guess, 6 years that I've been involved in this, I've seen a significant change.
Mm.
So I'd like to read a couple of endorsements for the book. This one is from Jeremy Lin. He says, "This book was so encouraging to me as an Asian American, continuing to explore how my identity shapes my faith. May we continue to find who we are and how much our unique voices add to the body of Christ." So for those who are not familiar with Jeremy Lin, he's a professional basketball player and was the focus of Linsanity a couple of years ago when he made a splash in the NBA. A great player. So I'm just curious, how did you all get in touch with Jeremy on this book?
Yeah, well, Jeremy's done he was a part of an InterVarsity small group, Asian American InterVarsity small group.
Okay.
Harvard. So there's different folks in InterVarsity who know him. This particular time, I think if I remember right, David's cousin either works with Jeremy at some level or knows somebody who works with him. I honestly can't remember now. It's like a bit fuzzy how it all worked, but we kind of went through a connection, right? Just really grateful for Jeremy taking time to read and to endorse. It's encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's another endorsement. This one's from Kathy Kong, who has spoken at our conferences too. The authors take on the limitations and possibilities of the label Asian American while leading Asian Americans back to ourselves, our communities, and our creator. The authors pass back and forth a narrative baton that honors those who came before us with grace and honesty and beautifully offer an invitation for readers to do the same. So can you summarize what you say about the limitations and possibilities of the label Asian Americans?
Mm. Do you want to try, Law?
Oh man, now I have like so many thoughts. Yeah, it's hard for us to define what Asian American is, because there are just so many experiences, right? Like we mentioned earlier, just your experience is different based on where you live in the U.S., based on your family story and your family's journey to the U.S. And so, yeah, Asian American was always one of those things that was complicated to define. And then how much do we feel like we identify with that because we couldn't define it. So it was, I feel like there's always been like, for many people, a journey of figuring out like, what is Asian American? How do I identify with that? What does this mean for me? And I feel like that's different for everyone. So I think there's some ways where like we might feel limited in that, but I think there's just so much potential for Asian Americans to gather as Asian Americans and really, like speak up for ourselves and make change that can benefit us. So I don't know, Sabrina, you can add to that, but that's trying to like put my thoughts together into a more succinct answer.
Yeah, no, I think that's I love what you said, La. Like there is there's like challenges with any kind of label, I guess. But I
Mhm.
mean, particularly with Asian American, with the number of ethnicities and generations and, as Law said, migration story, like refugee, immigrant, transracial adoptees, mixed folks. There's like a lot of different stories. And so to try and then the way that maybe predominant US culture tries to um, view Asian Americans as one thing, or as like, as a stereotype, as a perpetual foreigner, or as a model minority. It can be challenging to feel like, oh, this label is very, um, there's a lot there. But there's also, I think, yeah, as Law said, the opportunity to speak. And I think I say in the book somewhere, like, we don't just have one voice, we have a chorus. So it's going to sound, not uh not uniform, but I hope that like it brings like that there are some commonalities and ways that we've learned within the Asian American community, but also wanting to speak to broader society, like gifts that we feel like are coming from the Asian American churches and communities, that I think just, add to the church at large.
So as you know, I produce a conference called Publishing in Color that's intended to increase the number of books published by writers of color. So what advice do you all have for new writers of color who have not yet gotten published?
That's a great question. I think one thing I would say is like, find some friends you want to write with. Because I can't really imagine having gone about this myself, Um, maybe we had extra challenges because of, COVID lockdowns and pandemic and little kids online schooling and all that stuff. But even without all that, I think writing can be really lonely. So even if you're writing your own book, like a solo author, but finding other people to write with, who will give you feedback and those kinds of things. But yeah, I think that's been just having friends to go through it with has been a real gift for me.
Yeah, I think for me, I probably couldn't have written without the encouragement of others, people who like believed in me. So I definitely would say tell people that you really trust and who can give you the honest thoughts, about your desire to write or your intention to write. And like their encouragement is probably going to mean the most to you. And I feel like I would say like, yes, you can write a book, like you're allowed to write a book. Because I feel like for me, working with InterVarsity, we had access to IVP, right? Like if I wanted to write a book, I could just put in a proposal, but I don't know, I never felt like I could write a book or should I write a book? Am I allowed to write a book? Like those are just things that I think were just some barriers that maybe kept me from even considering writing, even though, personally for me, I've had a desire to write something at some point. And it, took so long to finally get here. So yeah, that's what I would say.
So I know you're right in the middle of launching this new book, but now that you're going through all this, do either of you have any plans for future projects, future books, future writing that you are able to talk about at this point?
Um, I don't, but I'm very open to future projects. It was really helpful to go through it once to know what it was like. So I feel like I've learned from that experience. I don't have any like, ideas right now for future projects, but I feel like I do look for those things though. Like I'm really open to a future project and I'm always open to like, oh, what are some ideas and exploring that a little bit more to see if there is something there. But I'm not in a hurry right now because I feel like, yeah, we're still in the midst of learning our names. But yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's a great question, Brian. I'm in the process of thinking about it. So I think when folks have asked me about it, I'm like, yeah, there was actually there's actually probably so much more I'd want to say about the chapters I did write
Hmm.
in this book, but we're, limited by page count and, other things. But like, it's like, but I think like La, I'm not in a hurry. I think there's other things I want to read and like study more. So I'm actually thinking about, what topic do I want to invest my energy into more in this next season? That I just want to learn more and learn at a deeper level, to perhaps be able to expand on some of the topics that I wrote about for this book. Because, like we said, this is a book that we wanted to like start conversations, and any one of those chapters you could write a whole book about, I think, and so I don't know. Yeah, we'll see what happens. But the process has been a good one. And there were definitely times I would be laughing if you told me that at the end of the process I might be considering working on more. Because, in the middle of it all, I was like, I don't know if we're going to get this done. Why did I sign myself up for this? It's all brutal. But yeah, I think at this point, it's like, I think I might have more to say. I want to learn more. I want to read more. I want to think more, talk with some more people. But I think there might be more to be said. So
that's really good. I mean, we need more books from writers of color. So, I really hope that you do that. So thanks again to both of you for being with us, and congratulations on the launch of the new book. Again, the title is Learning Our Names, Asian American Christians on Identity, Relationships, and Vocation. And you can learn more about it at ivpress.com. Thanks again.
thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.